Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas, everybody! Today we're having a No Limit Christmas, and I'm sure you guys have already guessed what that means. We're going to talk about No Limit Records Classic 1994/95 Christmas EP, Hi-Fo Christmas by the West Coast Bad Boys. But before we get into that, we actually have to start out with an earlier cassette by them, Christmas Time in the Ghetto by the Real Untouchables from 1992, also on No Limit Records, of course. So Master P and No Limit Records are, of course, from New Orleans. His whole family, his brothers, Mia X, all those guys, all from New Orleans. The big New Orleans empire. They represent New Orleans hip-hop and really put on the map, although there was classic stuff like Mannie Fresh and all that stuff before and after. But certainly No Limit Records were the hugest act in the 90s and probably still of all time from New Orleans. But not so many people necessarily know that while they're originally from New Orleans, like Master P and his family were born there, early in their career, they moved to Richmond, California, where they opened up a store and released their first grip of albums for actually a couple years in the early 90s. So, the first couple Master P albums, Real Untouchable albums, Mia X's first album, all that kind of stuff, were really recorded and released in California. That's why they called themselves the West Coast Bad Boys, because at that time they represented California, and they're working with guys like EA Ski and CMT, and just all these kind of, California West Coast producers, King George and stuff, acts who you sort of like, why did they leave? They seemed really kind of, interesting and tied very deeply into the No Limit stuff. Well, that's why, because then No Limit went back to New Orleans, and that's where they blew up. But if you ask me, all their best material, at least in terms of, like, Master P and his crew, I mean, like, Mystical, he was from New Orleans, and he was pretty dope. But the best of, like, Master P and his family's material was when they're from California. And admittedly, they were more derivative back then, which I covered in my previous Master P video. Maybe I'll link to that in the description. But still, kind of tighter production, working with some more interesting artists, and because they were derivative, frankly, they got some inspiration from some really dope hip-hop, so it kind of worked. They had a little bit more rugged, hardcore, sample-based kind of stuff, more classically hip-hop kind of stuff, but still very West Coast NWA kind of influence kind of material and all, and it was dope. And that's what we got here. Like, I'm not necessarily, or at all, a fan of, like, that whole kind of make 'em say, Golden Tank era of Master P No Limit stuff. But this old stuff, definitely raw, definitely amateurish in some ways, definitely, like not one of the cream of the crop greatest MCs, anything like that, definitely kind of lower the bar material, but still pretty cool, pretty effective, good tapes that I enjoyed back in the day and actually still enjoy now going back to. And that certainly includes Christmas in the Ghetto by the Real Untouchables, later known as TRU, TRU, which was just an acronym for the Real Untouchables. That was Master P and his crew, C Murder, Silk, and by his crew, I also mean his brothers. So Christmas in the Ghetto is a pretty dope record. It's pretty an interesting mix of being like a hardcore gangster rap, but with very kind of upbeat, silly Christmas carols being sung in the chorus. I mean, that's sort of what you have to expect from Christmas rap, after all. But what's interesting about it, A, is kind of a serious message lyrically. It's just talking about having hard times in the ghetto and how Christmas is different for them than it is for, like, the classic, what you see on television, Cosby Show, and, sitcoms and Rich Christmas and all that kind of stuff. They're saying Christmas in the Ghetto is a very different experience, and here it is. And that's actually kind of a serious, interesting message, and actually works as a genuine rap song and like a non-novelty kind of thing. But then, when they start belting out the Christmas carols, it definitely gets kind of novelty. So anyway, this is the single version. This song, Christmas in the Ghetto, which is the only song on here, does later appear on Hi-Fo Christmas, so you might wonder why bother with it at all. Well, a couple reasons. First, maybe just collectability, or more rare, old school, No Limit singles, got some interesting kind of fun original artwork in the interior. There's a couple different mixes on here. You got the instrumental, you got the slightly extended version. But the key version is because on the Hi-Fo Christmas EP, they only have the radio edit, and the only way to get the street version is right here on the single.
In the ghetto just ain't worth shit. Tell Santa Claus he can suck my dick. I guess I get the same fucking thing I got last year. Sitting in a burnt out building drinking beer. I don't have a job, no food, no fun, but I got the dope, 3 keys and a gun. So I tell a fiends to meet me on the block, open up shop and start selling rock. I'm making big dollars off these motherfucking fools. If they wanna check, then the money's in my shoes. Now here comes a dope fiend begging for a hit, saying can I please get a $50 fee? He showed me the money, then I went for my stash. Got the motherfucker big $50 bag. The man said freeze and my mouth just dropped. The stupid ass nigga was an undercover cop. Yeah, I was mad, but I didn't want to run. Staring me in the face was a big black gun. Now it's Christmas Eve and I'm like behind bars. Sitting in a cell looking up at the stars. Reminiscing about my kids with tears in my eyes. Thinking to myself, I just want to die.
So that was 92. Now we move, as I say, to 94/95, because this is a classic cassette. Came out in 1995. But there's actually an even rarer vinyl version, which came out in 1994, at the end of 94. And then 95 came the cassette and also the CD, which got a wide release. You could pick it up in Sam Goody and anywhere else around the world. So most people know it from 95, but strictly speaking, the vinyl EP that came out first came out in 1994. So again, there's some pretty fun stuff on here. And Master P does one of his best songs, Jacking for Christmas, on here, which is, besides sort of what it sounds like, it's all basically a rip-off of Ice Cube's Jacking for Beats, where he's jacking for a more, slightly more modern, because it's a newer song, because obviously he's ripping off Ice Cube, so Ice Cube came first. Hip-hop Beats is doing stuff like Regulators by Warren G, Thuggish Ruggish Bone by Bone Thugs and Harmony. It was kind of fun, is not only does he kind of jack their beats and rap over them for his Christmas song, but he kind of does, every time he does another artist song, like the Brat and all that, and he kind of does an impression, not totally an impression, but at least kind of mimicking their style to some degree on each song, so that makes it pretty fun. And, they're classic dope beats, which are better than, you think of when you think of, like, No Limit late 90s production. These are classic beats, so it sounds good. But again, all this is still West Coast Bad Boys era No Limit, so it's got a lot more of the kind of rich sample-based sound. Like, definitely, you think of, like, E.A. Skee's production, like, it's definitely got that Dr. Dre influence, kind of whiny G-funk music in here. But at the same time, it's also got classical samples from, like, Eric B. and Rakim and all that kind of stuff mixed in. So it's a pretty, dope blend. E.A. Skee and CMT, like, they were talented, so they made good stuff, even if you weren't necessarily a huge fan of that style, like, they made it good. So you got a lot of nice stuff on here. King George has a song on here called Locked Up for Christmas, which is really pretty tight. King George is one of those guys that's like, why did he fade away? Because I didn't realize back in the 90s that, No Limit up and moved back to New Orleans and left him behind. So it's good to have him on here. Unsurprisingly, Master P is really the main artist featured on the CP. He's got, like, his voice is on almost every song, and some of them are solo songs. Couple interesting choices on here. Like, one of the songs is No Limit Party Remix, which is just a remix of the song No Limit Party from this album, classic album, Ghetto's Trying to Kill Me, by Master P, with no real Christmas theme to it at all. I guess just because it's a festive party song, they put it on there. This has Reverend Do-Wrong Christmas Party, which is much more appropriate. It is a festive party song that actually legitimately references Christmas and Christmas stuff. But then there's a song in here called Chillin' in the Game by the Mafiosos. I don't know if you remember them. They're one of the more obscure artists that, again, when No Limit moved, they got left behind. But they have a song called Chillin' in the Game, and no connection at all to Christmas. I think the only reason it's on here is because they use the word chillin', and literally, through the whole song, they make no reference to snow, winter, anything like that. So there's some filler on here. The skits are annoying. The, haha, Christmas Carol joke versions of Christmas carols where they're singing, Santa gave me 12 hoes, haha, wears thin pretty quick. So it's kind of tough. You can't take something seriously and listen straight through and, like, drive around the neighborhood blasting beside your windows. But there is some actual good material on here. And at the same time, if you're in the market for novelty Christmas rap, which, hey, it's Christmas time, sometimes we are, then this is a great example of it. So it definitely, for Christmas rap, I highly recommend this EP. On its own, I would only sort of slightly recommend it for more No Limit fans. Like, this is a good EP, but again, kind of an uneven mix. It's got Dangerous Dame on here and some interesting people, so kind of a cool EP. But really, basically, just for the novelty of Christmas rap. But that's what you want, right? We're having a No Limit Christmas. So, hi for Christmas, Christmas in the Ghetto. Have a No Limit Christmas. See you guys next year.